When the Jaguar XE first came out, it made some pretty strong headlines by taking the fight right up to the mighty BMW 3 Series. Here was a car that came out of nowhere and was challenging the ultimate sports sedan. Now, the BMW might have always been a faster car, but with its sophisticated rear suspension setup, the Jaguar put itself in a different league when it came to driver engagement. Now though, the 7th generation 3 Series has once again furthered the yardstick for the ultimate sports sedan by once again leaning on its heritage of the ultimate driving machine. The Jaguar XE meanwhile has just received a mid-cycle update, and this one now has grown up to be a more wholesome luxury car. But which one of these should you buy if you're the sort of driver who prioritizes driving pleasure above all else? Well, let's find out. Now, it's the petrol 3 Series that has always been a very special car. And you know what? In this 330i model, you sure feel those genes being carried over. Now, unlike generations ago when the badge 330i meant a straight six, in this new generation Avatar, you get a 4-cylinder turbocharged petrol engine, and this one is good for 254 bhp and 400 Newton meters of torque. And because peak torque is spread very well across the rev range from 1500 to 4400, you get a lot of usable power on the road. But let's face it, this is a 330i after all, so it's all about power. So when you put it in Sport Plus and mash the long pedal, the engine will yell and it'll just shoot you forward. It's a very fun sensation to have. So this actually feels like a proper sports sedan. You sit nice and low in the cabin, and this car incidentally is longer, wider and taller than the model it replaces. So you get a lot more cabin room, but the wheelbase is also longer now, which means that there's plenty more space in the rear seat as well, but we'll get there in a bit. Now from where I'm sitting, I can get a glimpse of the bonnet ahead, and just because of the cabin layout, you just feel inherently that you're in a very special car. And the moment you get going, like I said, you realize that. Now in Sport Plus mode, acceleration of course is at its most intense, but it's the way this engine revs. It feels very free revving, it feels very willing, and it feels very refined. And when that engine note comes on, you instantly know that this is a car you're meant to drive. So the 3 Series does feel very, very engaging to drive, not just because of its straight line performance, which is commendable, but even in terms of the way it handles, the way it darts in and out of traffic and into corners and high speed bends, the way the car displays its level of grip and poise is just phenomenal. So it's all of this that's put together that makes the 3 Series such a thrilling machine to drive. Sure, the older car felt sharper in some areas when it came to grip and handling, and the amount of playfulness it was willing to give you. This car, in that sense, feels more grown up. This car is much stiffer than the model it replaces, but thanks to the stiffer chassis, the suspension now is very compliant. In fact, I have to say, this is the most comfortable 3 Series that I've ever driven. The ride is extremely pliant, and even over bad roads, you don't get jiggled about at all in the cabin. It's very comfortable, and this is a 3 Series that is actually very usable on our roads. It's a great fun car to drive, be it in the city or out on highways. But even if you encounter broken roads, you don't have to worry about it. Now, in terms of straight line performance, the BMW has more power than the Jag, and you know what? It feels it out on the road. But it's also the magic of this 8-speed automatic gearbox that in every mode it holds just the right gear and in the right revs. So you always know, even if you've lifted off in Sport Plus, it'll manage the revs and the gear just correctly so that you're never wanting for power. So the same thing carries forward to comfort mode, where everything is dialed down. But in terms of throttle response, it's just perfect for the kind of response you want in a more comfortable driving mode. And when it comes to eco mode, well, when you're cruising around the city on empty roads, it is actually very usable. But you have to remember that throttle response is fairly damped in that mode. So if you are looking to pull quick overtaking maneuvers and then slow down again, it's best you stick to comfort mode. And when you go to sport mode, of course, like I mentioned, kick down acceleration is just immediate and it's addictive, it's intoxicating, it's a lot of fun just because of the way this car delivers its power in the immediate manner that it does. Now that I've stepped into the rear seat of the 3 Series, I have to say that there is a remarkable improvement here over the previous generation model in terms of cabin space, because there's actually a lot of room in here now. There's a lot of leg room, and the bench itself is angled upwards nicely so that you have enough under thigh support. Otherwise, because there's a lot of room, you feel fairly airy in here, because you get a great view ahead and of the outside world from the side. But you have to remember that this is a rear-wheel drive saloon car, so there is a transmission tunnel running through the center of the car, which is why this is not a 5-seater at all. The tunnel is quite high here, so this therefore is a place for 2 occupants at the back. Now, like the 330i, this P250 model of the Jaguar XE comes with a 2-liter turbocharged petrol engine, and this one develops 246 bhp and 365 Nm of torque. Like the BMW, this car too is rear-wheel drive, and it comes with an 8-speed automatic gearbox. The XE comes with 3 drive modes: Eco, Comfort and Dynamic. And it's in dynamic mode that you want to be driving this car, because that's where it lets out a very nice engine note, throttle response is sharper, and the gearbox holds those gears correctly as well. Now, in terms of acceleration, you get a very decent amount of power out on the road. But you know what? This car has grown up. It feels more like a luxury car now. Earlier, the cabin of this car didn't feel as luxurious as it does now, and it definitely felt very willing out on the road. But this one, it's tuned more for comfort. That's what it feels like. It does not have that razor sharp acceleration and handling as the BMW, and while that feels like an out-and-out sports car, this feels like a sober luxury car. But don't mistake the XE's comfortable nature for the lack of performance, because out on the road you do get a very usable amount of power. Acceleration is fairly brisk. It's a little bit slower than the BMWs, but you know what? There's ample amount of power. 246 bhp is not a less amount. So if it's performance you're after, this car has an ample amount to offer. But if you're looking for a sports car-like driving experience, it's the BMW that you need to be going after. But this is a Jaguar after all, so it does feel special. In fact, it feels considerably more special than the BMW. People out on the road notice you, especially with this bright red shade that we have. So this one definitely is a head turner, and people ask questions about which model it is, what it is, which Jaguar it is. So it generates a fair amount of attention out on the road. Whereas in the BMW, people just look at you and they don't know it's a special car, even though it has the M kit. It's a very subtle one. So people just let you pass by thinking, oh, it's just another BMW. Well, it's not, but they don't know that. And since we're talking about this car's performance in respect to the 330i's performance, let me tell you this, that in terms of high-speed stability, both these cars are very stable at high speeds, but it's at the limit. That's when the BMW really shines. It stays absolutely blasted to the road. It feels so confident, so direct, so engaging. So that further adds to making that car the more engaging one to drive amongst the two we have here. The Jag then definitely makes for a great long distance car. It's got the legs on it and it's very comfortable. Actually, when you talk about ride comfort, the BMWs is very impressive, but the Jags is very good as well. And in respect to the BMWs, I think it's right up there. It's just that over certain surfaces, the ride of the BMW trumps the Jags. So that again is a plus point for the BMW. But when it comes to the Jaguar's ride, there's nothing wrong with it. It's a very comfortable car. Just that this cabin has a little bit more noise seeping into it over broken roads, and in terms of some fine vibrations as well over rough tarmac. But otherwise, the ride of this car, like the BMW, is very impressive. And overall, I have to say that this breed of cars has really evolved over time. Earlier, if you remember, cars such as the C-Class and 3 Series, they were very compact and they were very cramped in terms of space. But as you can see today, the XE and 3 Series both have very decent sized cabins. Moving on to the matter of handling, well, like I said, this car has grown up, and with that comes a sense of handling that is more associated to a luxury car. In that sense, the 3 Series has sharper handling traits, and that's what makes it the more engaging car to drive amongst the two. The Jaguar definitely is a more special automobile. It has more of a sense of occasion to it, and especially when you sit inside, I really love the new interiors of this car. It has an all-black cabin and it's leather clad everywhere. It's got some very nice piano black finish on the center console, and for the HVAC unit, it looks very contemporary. And on the whole, I think the cabin of the XE is very inviting. I especially like the driver instrument cluster, where the digital dials do look nice, but it's that screen in the middle for your satellite navigation that really makes life so easy in here. Another design element that lends to the sense of occasion in the Jaguar are the paddle shifters. They're nice and large units, and they're very easy to grab and just pull away at when you are driving fast. So the cabin of the Jag really is inviting, but it's now time to get into the rear seat and see what that feels like. Well, the moment you open the door, you do notice that the cabin looks much smaller at the back than of the BMWs. So you get a sense that it's going to be cramped. But when you step inside, what you realize is that there is actually just the right amount of space for somebody of my height, which is 5'8". So for me, there's just about adequate amount of leg room here. I can slide my feet under the front seat, and I have enough leg room just about. There is a decent amount of under thigh support. The cabin here, it doesn't feel too tight, but it doesn't feel as airy as the 3 Series cabin. Because that car has a longer wheelbase, the door is larger. So in that car, actually ingress and egress also is easier than in this car. And once again, this car too, like the 3 Series, is strictly a 4-seater because of the transmission tunnel running underneath. So 2 adults can sit comfortably over here. So the Jaguar XE here feels like the more special offering just because of the way it feels. The Jaguar badge, the new front end especially looks very sharp. Everybody notices it. It looks very nice, and it's worked very well to refresh the appeal of this car. As for the rest of the evolution, well, it's more along the lines of making it a more complete luxury car, be it in terms of the way it drives or in terms of the way it feels from inside the cabin, because that is now much more premium than earlier. The BMW 330i, on the other hand, sticks to its role of a sports sedan. This car is phenomenal fun to drive just because of how willing that engine is in terms of power delivery, and that's largely down to its powertrain. This engine just loves to rev. It feels so willing all of the time. Doesn't matter at which part of the rev range you're at. This engine is always so willing. The gearbox always holds the correct gears at the right revs. It knows what it's doing. So the answer we were looking to at the beginning of this video was which of these petrol sedans is more engaging to drive. Well, I have to say that in this case, the 330i is the hands down winner. What's more is that its larger cabin now makes it more practical too. The Jaguar, on the other hand, is the car you want to arrive in when you want to make a statement. For everybody is going to notice you and ask you about your car.